He wants to overthrow his own party if they stand in the way. That's the astonishing declaration swirling around Washington right now, and it centers on one name, Donald Trump. Yes, the former president who never seems to shy away from controversy has rattled the political stage once again by taking direct aim at Senate Republicans who refuse to bow to his demands. Some accuse him of holding a wrecking ball over his own allies' heads, threatening to tear down anyone who won't line up behind his massive legislative package. But what exactly is inside that so-called big, beautiful bill? And how did Elon Musk, the billionaire mogul who occasionally dips his toes into politics, end up calling it utterly insane and destructive? Today, we're going to unravel the twists and turns of this dramatic showdown, dissecting every major point of conflict, from healthcare to immigration to taxes. By the end of this deep dive, you'll know precisely why the Senate is in such an uproar. You'll discover how threatened defiance from within the Republican camp could spark repercussions beyond one senator's re-election campaign. And you'll see why Musk believes this legislation could reshape, or even undermine, entire industries, both old and new. Buckle up, because we're going to walk through the labyrinth of negotiations, accusations, and frantic deal-making that has Washington insiders glued to their phones, anxious for any new scrap of information. In this episode, we'll explore the immense scale of spending cuts, the cloud of controversy over Medicaid, the potential ramifications for food assistance programs, and the looming possibility of harsh crackdowns on immigration. Along the way, we'll examine exactly how the Republicans are navigating that narrow path to push a nearly 1,000-page bill through the Senate, despite fierce opposition and razor-thin vote margins. We'll also look at how the Democratic side of the aisle promises endless hours of obstruction if they don't get adequate time to read the fine print aloud on the Senate floor. Will the Republicans manage to pass it under special budget reconciliation rules, or will certain provisions get knocked out by the vigilant Senate parliamentarian? We'll expose the layers of this high-stakes game, one puzzling piece after another. Ready to take a deep breath and step into the frantic swirl of American politics? Let's kick off our blow-by-blow account. Now, picture this. The Senate floor late in the evening. Partisan tensions are at a boiling point. A hush descends as senators peer at their phones, waiting for one final Republican to arrive and cast a deciding vote. Vice President J.D. Vance looms in the wings, prepared to break a tie if needed. The air is electric with whispered conversations. Groups of staffers shuffle from one Senate office to another, carrying reams of paper. The screens on the chamber walls display the current motion to proceed. Slowly but surely, the final moments tick by. Then, at nearly the last second possible, the outcome flashes. 51 to 49, motion to debate is approved. The road is now open for a furious round of amendments, speeches, and political artistry. Donald Trump has been fueling the drama from the start. He demanded that Republicans push forward a gigantic spending package peppered with a mixture of terrifying cuts, new tax deals, and, above all, expansions of his well-known immigration policies. Trump exudes unwavering confidence in the success of what he's calling his big, beautiful bill, brushing aside concerns from budget analysts, hospital associations, and even some moderate Republicans. The impasse? Not every Republican senator is comfortable with the package, especially once it veers into extremely severe Medicaid cuts that states say they simply aren't prepared to endure. Enter North Carolina's Senator Thom Tillis, who, after scanning the bill's fine print, cast a no vote on moving forward. He insisted that the cost to his state's hospitals and communities would be catastrophic. The senator described how new constraints on Medicaid could force North Carolina to end coverage for hundreds of thousands of vulnerable individuals who only recently gained access to health care. Too high a price tag, Tillis warned. Yet that single defection from the Republican side was enough to bring Trump's fury crashing down on him like a tidal wave. On social media, Trump teased that there was a line of people ready to primary Tillis in the next election season, pledging to meet each one to find out who might be worthy to replace a senator who, in his eyes, failed to stand by the team in a crucial hour. The hostility doesn't stop there. Elon Musk burst into the conversation in grand style. The ever-controversial billionaire behind companies like Tesla and SpaceX labeled Trump's new legislation as utterly insane and destructive. He rattled off claims that the bill poured money into dying industries while ignoring the technology and innovative sectors that could steer America's future. "This thing will destroy millions of jobs," he barked in a post, sending shockwaves across social media. People have grown used to Musk's sudden policy takes, but these remarks felt particularly pointed. They placed him squarely in opposition to Trump's renewed quest for deep tax cuts and heavy spending on everything from oil exploration to building contingents of immigration and customs enforcement officers along the southern border. But how did the Republicans manage to propel the motion forward with only a 2-vote margin? That's where Senate tactics come into play. Republicans currently hold a slim majority in the Senate. They plan to rely on a process called budget reconciliation. Normally, trying to force something this colossal through would risk a filibuster, a procedure that requires a supermajority of 60 votes for legislation to advance. But budget reconciliation can circumvent that hurdle, as long as the measures in the bill directly impact the budget. The Senate parliamentarian, that often overlooked but powerful official who polices the rules, has already nixed certain provisions that didn't pass muster. Nonetheless, the lion's share of the bill has survived her scrutiny, enabling Republicans to surge forward with an ambitious mission to get it all passed before the approaching 4th of July deadline. While much of the press coverage fizzes around the personal feuds, Trump's flaring wrath toward Republicans who might vote no, the flash of captivating commentary from Musk, there are real, tangible policy repercussions lurking behind every line of the measure's 940 pages. One major example: the largest Medicaid cuts in the history of the program. Critics are calling it catastrophic. The plan institutes work requirements for certain Medicaid recipients, which Republicans argue will spur more people to find employment and reduce government dependency. Hospitals, especially those in rural communities, see it differently. They predict that these sweeping reductions, combined with a cap on how much money states can raise from healthcare provider taxes, will shred the safety net that keeps them afloat. Indeed, the American Hospital Association has publicly declared the measure historic in its devastation. This looming threat to rural hospitals is likely the wedge that pushed Tillis over the edge, transforming a reliable Republican into a surprising no vote. He's up for re-election in the distant 2028 cycle, but he seems unwilling to risk the stability of North Carolina's healthcare for short-term party unity. The question, though, is who else might defect once they read the actual texts and hear mounting public concern. Democrats, for their part, vow to force the reading of the bill in full, a near 15-hour affair, in an epic attempt to expose each detail. Where it goes from here is still up in the air, but one thing's certain. If Republicans can't get at least 50 votes and prompt the vice president to tip the scale, the entire effort could stall in humiliating fashion at the last minute. Now, if you're intrigued by the unraveling tension so far, this is the perfect moment to show your support. If you're finding this breakdown insightful, give us a quick thumbs up or a like. A small show of appreciation helps us continue delivering these in-depth analyses. But wait, there's more. The complexities extend beyond Medicaid. The synthetic swirl of new immigration policy is just as volatile. This big, beautiful bill earmarks hundreds of billions of dollars to fortify the southern border. That includes tens of billions for a wall with Mexico, tens of billions to boost and expand detention facilities, and thousands more officers to handle the surge in arrests and deportations. Trump sees it as a potent way to clamp down on illegal crossings, but critics say it's a blunt approach that fails to address the broader realities of immigration. In fact, one of the measure's stated goals is to deport approximately 1 million people per year. Achieving that would require an unprecedented labor force of border and ICE agents, not to mention a substantial expansion of detention centers. Even more controversial is how the bill locks in the massive tax cuts Trump championed during his first presidency, originally passed in 2017. Those cuts were set to expire soon, but under this legislation, they'd essentially become permanent. On paper, that might sound appealing to individuals who enjoyed lower tax burdens. Still, the Joint Committee on Taxation warns it could increase the national debt by more than $4 trillion over time. Opponents argue that the federal government simply can't afford such a revenue drop, especially when combined with the new demands of border security and other costly policies embedded in the measure. Yet, that's not all. The changes to programs like SNAP, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, have whipped up a flood of opposition from advocacy groups nationwide. Essentially, recipients up to the age of 64 would be required to work at least 20 hours per week to keep receiving food benefits if they're considered able-bodied, even if they have children aged 14 or older. This provision ignited outrage from activists who note that parents of teenagers might still face substantial caregiving costs, from after-school supervision to extracurricular expenses. Some states, such as Texas, have already rejected certain federally funded nutritional programs in the name of saving money, raising concern that this new push for cuts could amplify childhood hunger more than ever. Meanwhile, a draft letter from hospital associations in Louisiana hammered home the idea that if states can't pull in enough revenue to sustain Medicaid, given the constraints in the bill, the consequences for families in dire need will be nothing short of atrocious. So, how is public opinion forming around these developments? Polling data remains fluid. Many voters remain unaware of the finer details, only hearing sensational headlines about Trump lashing out, Musk condemning it, or Republicans in the Senate forging ahead. Typically, complicated budget proposals take time to marinate in the public's mind, but the Republicans are steaming full speed ahead, apparently hoping to wrap this up before a wave of public discontent can fully materialize, or before Democrats can effectively organize a pressure campaign. If the blueprint stands, the bill must go back to the House of Representatives, which already passed an earlier version. Members of the House may balk at certain Senate provisions, though. Some believe the Senate's last-minute deals might water down essential parts of the agenda. Others say it piles on even more severe cuts. That tension could set the stage for yet another round of negotiations, with the clock ticking. In the swirl of chaos, one might ask, where does Senate leadership stand? Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is taking a hard line, asserting that Democrats will do everything within their power to slow the passage. He's threatening an all-night session to read the entire text publicly, a move rarely used, but undeniably powerful. Schumer's bet is that once the public hears the magnitude of the reforms, including the staggering expansions in border enforcement and crippling cuts to Medicaid, any wavering senators in the Republican ranks might think twice. This tactic buys time for the media and general populace to glean exactly how far-reaching the changes are, provided that the mainstream press picks up the storyline. Meanwhile, Republicans have put forth nearly every persuasive tool in their arsenal to secure votes. President Trump himself spent part of his weekend golfing with Lindsey Graham and Rand Paul, known for their sometimes unpredictable stances. Whether they were enticed by the sunshine on the golf course or by the prestige of shaping an enormous policy milestone, they appear ready to keep the president's signature legislation afloat. Graham has historically been a friend of Trump's, but Rand Paul tends to be a wild card, prioritizing a libertarian ethos. If Rand Paul nods in approval, it signals that the overall package, from a fiscal standpoint, resonates strongly enough with his limited government ideals, despite the eye-popping scale of the cuts. All the while, Elon Musk's rhetoric resonates in the background, grabbing the attention of media outlets. When a public figure with nearly universal name recognition brands something insane, it could sway moderate voices who fear that supporting the bill might land them in a precarious position with not just the voter base, but also with influential tech leaders who are shaping the economy's future. Musk insists that the bill is a bet on the past, heavy resource extraction industries, big militarized expansions, border fortifications, rather than the future of green energy, space, or artificial intelligence. Some lawmakers, especially those from states with emerging technology sectors, quietly admit they worry about the optics, particularly if these cuts hamper the potential of new industries to thrive and create modern jobs. But the White House churns on undeterred. Plans to celebrate a legislative triumph remain in the works, with staffers enumerating the wins the package could bring for Trump's inner circle. Economists on the president's side claim that the tax breaks, extended permanently, will stimulate financial growth. They argue that boosting border protection will slash illegal immigration and help funnel jobs back to American citizens who need them. They tout that stiffer work requirements for Medicaid and SNAP will incentivize recipients to seek gainful employment, theoretically uplifting them out of government dependency. At least that's the official narrative. Detractors label it a fantasy, pointing to historically high deficits and uncertain markets, which could undermine the entire premise. That's not to say the Republicans are entirely monolithic in support of the bill. In hushed hallway conversations, more than a few senators have expressed unease about the magnitude of the cuts. Whispers swirl around a handful of moderate Republicans who might consider crossing the aisle if the final text remains as uncompromising as it is now. Some lament that the Medicaid constraints, in particular, are so sweeping that their local hospitals and clinics might never recover. Yet, few are courageous enough to stand in the crosshairs of Trump's ire, especially after seeing how swiftly and publicly he turned on Tillis. The concern that a no could attract a hand-picked primary challenger financed by Trump's supporters keeps them firmly in line. Meanwhile, Republican strategists are trying to spin the conflict by claiming that Tillis's lone dissent was a mere blip, an isolated stance by someone who presumably didn't appreciate the bigger picture. Yet it's apparent he's not alone in anxiety, even if so far he is the only one to jump ship. Just how far that anxiety spreads is uncertain. The next few days could be decisive. At the epicenter of the maelstrom stands the question, will this bombastic big beautiful bill ultimately prove politically advantageous for the Republican Party, or will it become an anchor that drags them down in public opinion? If it passes, Trump can declare a legislative victory, demonstrating that his brand of politics hasn't lost its capacity to deliver major policy. At the same time, lawmakers who voted for it will have to explain the repercussions to their constituents, the small-town hospital closures, potential layoffs, or even the whiplash from the short-term jolt of extended tax breaks, followed by inevitable budget shortfalls. Before we move on, let me slip in another friendly reminder. If you think it's crucial to keep tabs on how these major changes might affect everyday life, from healthcare coverage to potential job losses, consider subscribing right now. That way, you'll never miss any of our future breakdowns, and you can stay fully informed as the political landscape keeps shifting. Now, the final question on everyone's mind. How swiftly can the Senate wrap this up? The Republican leadership is aiming to move faster than a lightning bolt. If all goes according to their plan, all the necessary debates and amendments will be concluded within a matter of days, whisking the final Senate version back to the House. That's where the measure might face complicated headwinds. When the House originally greenlit their version, they likely did so based on certain assumptions about how the Senate's modifications would look. The changes that carved out or watered down specific elements, like the delayed start on provider tax limits for hospitals, could have House conservatives or liberals bristling. The House also has its share of members who consider themselves guardians of fiscal restraint. They might recoil at the specter of ballooning deficit estimates. Then again, House members loyal to Trump could rally behind him, just as the Senate has. We won't know until that final, nail-biting vote. Should the House reject the Senate's changes, the entire process heads to a conference committee, a joint team from both chambers that would hash out a compromise. That's a labyrinth that few enjoy navigating because it can derail the swift timeline leadership craves. Still, Trump has made it clear that his dream is to have a big signing ceremony, ideally with fireworks and bold headlines that read "a historic win," or to that effect, culminating right around the 4th of July. The symbolism is too good to pass up. But what if the timeline slips? Will he be forced to push it back, or might he sign an incomplete version, hoping the details can be hammered out later? Those who have observed Trump's presidency know he's not one to break a self-imposed deadline easily, so every hour counts. We should also consider how this affects the mainstream Republican brand. In recent years, the party has sought to shake off criticisms that it focuses too heavily on the wealthy through repeated tax cuts and corporate breaks. This bill's sweeping Medicaid limitations and further extension of tax cuts might fan those flames of accusation once again, reinforcing the perception that Republicans prioritize giant corporations over the average American. On the other hand, supporters say it's precisely these broad-based and business-friendly measures that allow new jobs to sprout. The debate will rage on, with each side marshaling data and anecdotal evidence. From the vantage point of moderate Democrats, the strategy is to lay everything on the line right now, to highlight the immediate impact on struggling families, older adults who are forced to work until they are nearly in their mid-60s to keep food benefits, and the potential closure of underfunded rural hospitals. Senate Democratic leadership keeps pounding their fists, promising that if Republicans hold them hostage under time constraints, they'll respond by protracting proceedings with a methodical reading of the entire text, page by page, hour by hour, until the public is outraged enough to let the phone lines ring off the hook. It's a battle that blends raw partisan ambition with real-life consequences. At stake are billions of dollars for tackling immigration, billions more in the realm of defense spending, major shifts in the social safety net for low-income and vulnerable populations, and a budget blueprint that will shape the economy for years to come. All the while, we're treated to a parade of drama, Trump's fury, Musk's scorching commentary, and the precarious plight of Republicans trying to hold their coalition together. Looking back at the original question, will Republicans who defy Trump face political ruin? The immediate answer is uncertain. Tillis has stepped out of line, absorbing the brunt of Trump's anger, but he might not be the last. If the public backlash to the bill's extreme provisions grows too intense, more senators might join him. We should be mindful, though, that Trump's brand remains powerful among the party's base. A risky vote against him could trigger a formidable primary challenge. It's this political calculus that fosters unwavering loyalty, even if the legislation itself sets off alarm bells. As the tension builds, keep your eyes on how the legislative chess pieces move. If the Senate manages to pass the bill, that's one victory step, but not the final chapter. Perhaps the House will nod in agreement, or perhaps another showdown looms on that side of the Capitol, with Freedom's caucus members or moderate Republicans balking at certain stipulations. So, as this saga races toward an explosive finish, the question remains, will the big, beautiful bill actually do what its proponents promise, or will it unravel under the weight of ballooning costs, public indignation, and a fierce Democratic blockade? In a matter of days, we might well have the answer, provided the reading, the debates, and the possible backroom deals don't cause a meltdown first. Regardless of where one stands, few can deny that the drama, the uncertainty, and the high stakes have already cemented this story as one of the most riveting episodes of the current political season. This is the heart of American politics. Swirling controversies, razor-thin votes, bombastic personalities, and consequential decisions that could pivot the direction of the nation. Strap in, folks, because the next few days on Capitol Hill are going to be one wild ride.